All right. Welcome to Spring Office Hours. We are on season 3, episode 40. My name is DaShaun Carter. I'm a Spring Developer Advocate, and Dan is not here with us today. We're thinking about him today. Instead, I'm joined by Phil Webb. Phil,
hello.
It's a special day.
It is release day.
It's release day. It is Spring Boot 3.4.0 release day. And
3.4.0
day it is. If you're joining us, this is a live stream. It's also a podcast available in all the places that you'll be downloading your podcast from. But if you're joining us live, my parents like to watch the show. Please say hi. Let us know where you're joining from. And let us know while you're in the chat. The bits are available. Let us know once you've updated, once you've deployed your new Spring Boot 3.4 app. Let us know in the chat. So this is fantastic. I'm giddy. This release, it's been a long time coming. We've been cranking out releases. We just had the Spring AI milestone 4 got released just yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. Now, there's a little interesting thing here. One of the things, Jitter Ted, hello, welcome. Ted is somebody that's going to be streaming right after our release party. Ted's going to be doing a stream, and he's going to go and update some code to Spring Boot 3.4. So we're excited. Thank you, Ted, for being here.
I hope it works. You should really wait for the 0.1 release.
No, that's not real. So this is my thing. This is, I'm trying to live what I call the N-0 life. I want to be on the latest and greatest. What I think is a great idea for our community is we're trying to encourage them. Give feedback. When we have milestone releases, when we have release candidates, let's get more people using that so we can identify issues before it happens. And of course, things slip through, right? We're adding new features and there's a lot of work. But the more people that we have grabbing these early releases, grabbing the milestone releases, the better, right? We've watched Josh use snapshots for conferences in front of thousands for years. So
that's just foolish.
Surely we can take a milestone release. Surely we can take a release candidate. This is exciting. And we got a great, look at this. This is awesome. We got a great crowd. Sergi, thank you so much for being here. Yes, hi from Pakistan. This is good. Like the gang's here. We have a regular Simon. Fantastic. This is wonderful. Look at this. All over the place. And what fun. Like it should be a party. We get a new Spring Boot version.
I like that comment where it says that it got good test coverage, so that's good. Upgrade should be straightforward. I've got good test coverage.
Yep. The better your tests, the more confidence you have.
We have a fair few tests as well, so hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yes, let us know where you're from. But this N-0 life, adopting and pulling the new ones, that's a benefit. That's nice, right? It can be. This is the conversation we had earlier. It can be a differentiator. What I like to say is like if you have a job offer from 2 different companies, one company they both say Spring Boot, you're going to be a Spring Boot engineer. You got a job offer, right? You're in. But before you accept that offer, ask those companies, what version of Java are you running in production? What version of Spring Boot are you running in production? That's all I'm saying. It's a good idea. Just ask.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is equal. Ask, where are you going to go? Right? If you're a developer, where would you go if the options?
Well, I mean, like if it's 2.7, you can still get commercial support, so it might be all right. If you're on 1.5, time to walk away.
It's a good question. At least ask, right? Lots of companies, they're saying Spring Boot developer on their job titles as they're hiring.
Exactly.
Right? It's an obligation. You should do it for yourself. Ask that question. Right? And that's a difference. The other side of that coin is if you're hiring and you're trying to get the best and the brightest from our community. Do you think that you're going to get the best and the brightest if you're still using Spring Boot 1.5? Right? Well, get on the latest and greatest. Be there.
This upgrade, it shouldn't be too onerous. Hopefully, I think it does. We release every 6 months, and framework releases every year. So this one is pulling in a new framework version. So maybe a little more risky than the last one, but I don't think it's going to be too bad if you're on the 3X line already. I think it should be a fairly straightforward upgrade.
And
kicking myself later when we look at the issue tracker, but
well, I'll just say this. I've been using it, right? I've been taking the milestone releases. I've been taking the release candidate.
I haven't seen you raise any bugs, so we're fine.
I haven't raised any bugs, but also the process, right? Another part of the conversation on my N-0 life is I have customers that says, "Oh, we're a big org, and we would like to be on N-2 for reasons because we're too big and we can't do that." So, a customer now, as of 3.4, they're going to say that, "Hey, we should be on 3.2."
Interesting.
But today, I've been watching. I've been hitting refresh on the blog. I've been watching the repositories. I've been watching start.spring.io, and I've been watching as first what I saw was Spring Boot 3.2.6, right?
Yeah, that's the last open source.
Spring Boot 3.2.12.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then I saw Spring Boot 3.3.6.
Yeah.
And then just now, we see the blog post for Spring Boot 3.4. So we have a process here today where we did releases for 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4. There's nothing special about the 3.2 release, right? They're coming out at the same time. So how can anybody say that the 3.2 release is more stable than the 3.4.0 release when they came out on the same day? That's my argument. And you can put holes in it, but this is what I'm saying.
Well, one thing worth noting is this 3.2 is the last of the open source supported 3.2 versions. So whatever it was, 12, 3.2.12. So there won't be a 3.2.13 released in open source. So you should really either jump to 3.4 or get on 3.3 if you're not already.
And I don't want to give anybody the wrong idea here, but we have a comment about there's another language that was supposed to have a release today, and they didn't quite deliver. That there was something was found. Somebody maybe they cut the release and somebody found a bug, and we got to go and fix that. So that 8.4.0 release doesn't appear to be making it to public, and 8.4.1 is going instead, and that happens.
It happened to us like way back. I think we had one release that was like that. I don't know. It's like releases should be cheap, so it shouldn't really be a problem. But it does half get you, and when you have to cut a 0.1 5 minutes after, it's a matter of pride sometimes. I feel for them. It doesn't matter, but it's still frustrating.
I've been on this journey for a long time, this Spring Boot journey, and it's been fun. And there's only one time where I felt like I got burned on a release. So, hey, I took an upgrade and I didn't evaluate it all the way. And that was back in like 2017. But since then, the upgrade process has been pretty painless for the things that I do. Again, I'm just me. I'm going pretty thin, but the upgrade process has been pretty painless. And rarely do I hear like a war story from the field, from our community, where, the upgrade was broken and I couldn't do it and it took us months to do. This process of going forward now, I do hear of, hey, we were still using Spring Boot 2.4. We were still using Spring Boot 2.2. And that story of, I tried to go from old version to Spring Boot 3.0, and I broke something in between. I've heard that story many, many times.
I think the 1.5 to 2.0 upgrade was like us taking the opportunity to fix stuff that we felt we could do better in our own code. So that one can be a bit bumpy. And then the 2.0 to 3.0 upgrade, I think, is the Jakarta stuff, which is generally speaking just annoying, but not like difficult. It's just annoying. It's like, my imports are wrong, and you can't just do like a global search and replace because there are still Java X imports. So that one, there's recipes now, and I think people have got it down to a fine art. So even there, it's not so difficult. But
yeah,
the actual boot upgrade, I think we were quite lucky because compared to the pain you had to go through to get to Jakarta, anything that we did like just kind of slipped under the radar. So we were fine. We could break things without people complaining too much.
Yeah. Simon's one of our regulars, and he's already got feedback. The bean-based conditions in the last blog, we talked about some of the new features that were coming, and a lot of it, came in Spring Framework 6.2 before. And the way I've been positioning, the way I've been talking about Spring Boot 3.4, it's really kind of adopting a lot of the new things that are in Spring Framework 6.2. But what else is in this release? What are the things that are top of mind for you in this release?
What was that about the bean conditions? Is that the fallback stuff?
He said it's just worded a bit odd.
Oh,
Or maybe
okay.
it's just the documentation. Simon's great at helping us out and giving us early feedback.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, if that's wrong, we can. One of the things we did, like we used to put release notes in the docs, which was a bit of a pain because once you release them, they were done. Now our release notes are on a wiki, so if there are things that are kind of like confusing or we've missed, we can go and edit them like on the fly. So do bring them to our attention if there's something that's confusing.
I will say this. One of the feedbacks that we get a lot, and it's always worth repeating, we're getting great feedback on all the documentation changes.
Oh, good, because that was what was keeping me up last night.
All the documentation, the way that documentation is being released. And for me today, just I was expecting this, I was looking for this, having the blog come out and seeing that, hey, it's on start.spring.io, having that just consistency, like this is powerful stuff. Like this is a real machine. I said, the machinery is working. Like we're getting these releases out and all the things that you expect to be there are there. So I want to say like, yeah, that's definitely.
So if I look a bit tired, it's because last night I was working on trying to get something that I've been doing on and off for at least 6 months now. And it sounds super easy, but getting it over the, like, you know, that 80-20 rule where you've done 80% of it and that last 20% takes forever. It now in the docs for the newer versions, anytime we reference a class, like we now get a link to the Java doc of that class. And it seems like a small thing, but it took like forever to kind of get that update done. You'd think it would be easy, but it kind of shows some of the, I think as a kind of professional who's working in this space all the time, it's dead easy to say, oh, it's an act component, and everyone knows what that is. But in reality, of course, they might not know what it is or where the import is. So having these kind of cross references in the docs is really super helpful. And we've done that with everything and like fixed a ton of like documentation issues as well, like where we fat fingered class names and stuff.
Great point. I'm going to add, one of the benefits of being in this role is I get to kind of see and hear about developers migrating they're coming into the Spring ecosystem, and they don't know any of it, right? They're still understanding what's this inversion of control, what is this whole thing. So there's another benefit of our ecosystem is the documentation is great, it's always been great, but the onboarding in the community is awesome. I think that Spring Boot is a really great onboarding tool for any engineer, and I've learned that there are universities that's kind of what they focus on. Their software engineering courses are built on top of Spring Boot. This is amazing. I'm hearing on the other side that some universities are starting to back away from Java and lean into some of the other languages, which I find confusing. But here we are. We have a lot of stuff. What else? What are
the highlights? Is that I mean two things kind of come to mind. One is the structured logging stuff. I think has really landed well. Very happy with that, and a kind of lot of work went into the design of that. Some things that you perhaps wouldn't necessarily think about on the surface of it. And the other one that I'm quite pleased with is to finish off a bunch of work that was started before, which was like identifying issues with the way that we create HTTP clients and trying to offer a much better way of customizing those, which again is a kind of a difficult problem to kind of come up with good abstractions, because we'll quite often find this in Boot that there's a framework has done a great job of abstracting stuff away, and then we need to kind of keep those abstractions, but sometimes peel back the layers and let people poke with the internals of the engine. And
Yep.
there's like 5 different engines, so kind of those customizations can be hard to do in a natural way.
This is again speaking at Spring at a holistically, the abstractions that Spring provides makes it so that 90% of the stuff that we take to production, we have a nice abstraction layer, and we can switch between those 5 different engines easily. It's that last little bit where, for this one particular use case, that is the special sauce for our company and a differentiator for what we deliver. This one special use case, I need to go a little bit deeper. And what I found is Spring makes that relatively easy. So I can go from the 5 different engines. And if I need to peel the layers back, I have the ability to go direct. Spring doesn't prevent me from doing that.
No, this one was driven by, we wanted to switch to the new, the JD. So there's like a JDK HTTP client that's been available in Framework for a while. And we really wanted to switch to it because that's what Framework uses by default now. It hasn't got some of the quirks of there's one called the simple HTTP client, which it's got some issues. And we've wanted to switch for like ages, but we need to offer people a way of like switching back, because some people may be relying on the quirks. So that's why this whole sort of customization layer had to be developed before we could change the default, so that you can, I think in the release notes, there's a thing about a property you can set if you want to go back to the old one.
Yep.
And normally what we do is, Spring Boot patterns are very much like, look at the class path, see what you've got on the class path and make that as a deciding factor. So we often go like, oh, there's Apache HTTP components, so we'll use the Apache one, or there's Netty, so we'll use the Netty one. But of course, with the JDK implementation, there's always those 2 available. So we haven't got a kind of clear signal on how to switch.
Got it. Simon's bringing up another note. Like, one of the things as people are upgrading, they're gonna, oh yeah, hey, something's changed. The way that my beans are being initialized has changed. The conditionals have changed. And if they haven't read the release notes, then they might report it as a bug.
Yeah.
That's one of the visions, I think, for this is like, hey, we want to make sure that our community, here's the things that you need to look out for. Here's the things that are coming. You might want to look out for. Make sure to pay attention. Read the release notes, of course, but we want to give you that kind of the quick version, the thing that most people are going to do.
It's super hard because we always structure our release notes so that the top section is like the kind of, I've got work to do. How do I upgrade? I don't care about these new features, and we try and list all the things that are likely to bite you. But it's hard because we're not only boot is not just a thing on its own. It's like it's pulling in dependencies left, right, and center that you might be using, some of which are not even developed by the Spring team, and they might bite you as an upgrade. So it's really hard. Upgrading software is just difficult, and you kind of need to follow the trails. Especially if you're jumping 2 revisions, you've got 2 sets of boot release notes and all the release notes of the dependencies to worry about. It's not an easy job.
Yeah, I don't find myself really stressing too much about upgrades, because one is the auto configuration that Spring Boot provides is fantastic, always has been. But 2, the release train concept, right? I can use that parent POM. I can follow the release train. So with these upgrades, I have this understanding that the things that I'm grabbing on initializer, these things are known and they've been tested to work together.
Yeah.
So I feel good.
Generally, that's definitely the best way of going. Don't try and mix the older versions with the ones that we manage, because we're not saying it won't work, but all of our tests are based on the parent POM. So if you follow that, then you've got your test coverage plus ours. Whereas if you don't follow that, you've just got whatever tests you've written.
One of the things I think is hard for our community to realize is how much work goes into that release train, how much work goes into making sure that promise is kept, of being able to grab any one of these dependencies and put it into your project and use it to the best, and it'll work together.
Yeah, it's the boot build takes, I think it depends on what you change, but it can take well over an hour, and that's primarily due to all of our tests that we have, integration tests and stuff, and we can't test everything. I think the worst kind of bug often with an upgrade is something that doesn't obviously break, but then when you push it into production, oh, this thing's suddenly consuming more memory, or under load it's slower. Those things are very hard to catch during your own testing, because it kind of goes at odds against what you want from your tests, which is to get, make sure that it's generally right and get out of the way quick.
I was at the Portland Java user group earlier this week, and one of the questions from one of the attendees was like, how come some of these other tools can't be put into the initializer? How come we can't put in, and I think his examples are like the find bugs Maven plugin or the PMD Maven plugin to go and make sure that we have cleaner code. How come these things? And my answer, correct me if I'm wrong, my answer is that because it needs to work with all of the other things, because it needs to be released and releasable with all of these other things, and it's got to be tested with all these other things. So it's not an easy, we can't just like add it to the list and then, hey, yeah, it shows up. There's a process. That release train has to make sure that the version that we support with 3.4.0 stays supported with that 3.4 release train.
Yeah, it's a difficult balancing act, I think, and also we're not we are not a team of like an infinite number of people, so we have to pick our battles as well. So sometimes you have to just pick what you can realistically achieve and what's going to give our community the best bang for the buck. And I think setting up something like Checkstyle is really valuable, but I'm not sure it's totally in our wheelhouse.
Often I get, I'm going to ask the people that are here in the live stream, like, how many people do you think are contributing? How many people do you think work on the Spring team here? And how many people, how big do you think the team is? Because I've had customers say, well, this team is clearly 1,000 people. There's 1,000 engineers working on Spring and Spring Boot. Clearly you have the time and resources because it's being used by everyone, everywhere, right? Clearly the team has to be massive. So I'm asking, I don't see if anybody will.
I was guessing 8. I don't even know I don't know what the rules are with things like that. I don't know if is that a trade secret? I don't know.
Less than 100. I can safely say that there are less than 100.
Substantially less, yeah. And if you look at the GitHub contributors, I think one reason we punch above our weight in terms of like the number of people that work on the project full time is that we do get a lot of really, really good contributors. So if you look at the contributions, you might think there are, and there probably is near 1,000 people. I don't know. What's Boot got at the moment? Let's have a look. I'm curious because I always like the put. So we have 1,125 individual contributors that have released stuff that we've merged.
That's fantastic.
Pretty impressive, and I think our pull requests are pretty high as well. So yeah, we've got some like really amazing people in the community that sometimes people that work on the project, from the community, have a real sort of specialist niche as well, and it's amazing some of the stuff they catch. Like we got one guy who just like constantly sending in fixes and polish stuff that we've just, and you like look at it and you go, how on earth did I mess this one up? And they sometimes you go to bed and you wake up and there's a fix for something that you've messed up, and it's super appreciated that people do that and spend the time to look at the code, and because it's not an easy project. We try and make it as easy as we can to build and contribute, but it's a large project. It takes a while to build, and you've got to understand a lot of things. So we really do appreciate the people that take the time to contribute.
Yeah, and We also get asked a lot, like, hey, how do I contribute? How do I, give more time to the Spring community? One of the things that I dig into is documentation. Simon here, for example, he's reading the release notes and he's always giving feedback, and I take that feedback directly back where I can,
Yep.
and just reading and staying on top of it, giving 5 minutes a day to check out the Spring.io blog. That's beneficial.
Yeah,
If
yeah. Often you don't need to contribute. People, I think, in open source think, oh, contribution means a pull request code. And often it doesn't. It can mean trying the milestones, giving us a well-crafted bug report with reproducers, finding issues in the documentation. All those kind of like things are very, very valuable, and don't necessarily result in a commit to the project directly from the person that raised them, but are still super useful.
Yes, yes. You talked about this specialist niche. One of the other things that I've noticed, we talked about Spring AI. Like, we have these buckets, these projects, these patterns, these data stores, etc. And sometimes they need a little bit of specialist feedback. The one that is in my head is Spring Batch, right? The story behind Spring Batch, and that this was kind of the way that business was ran. It's still the way that business ran, but we took those patterns that existed with our community and our partners, and we brought those patterns, and that was the foundation for Spring Batch. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm just some engineer and I made a thing. No, it was taken from the community, and it was evaluated by large enterprises and community and experts and people with that specialist. I've got a ton of experience in this space, and then they wrote books about it. But the projects that come out of the Spring team are not just like made up, here's a new thing for you to try. They come from the demand and from the community. Like, hey, here's the new things that we have to do. We're going to the cloud now. Let's have an easier way. We're doing AI now. Let's give you an easier way.
Yeah, yeah. So many of the projects are born from that kind of thing. Look at Spring Integration, which was, I think, mainly driven from the Enterprise Integration Patterns book, or a lot of the inspiration for Spring Data comes from the domain-driven design book. You've got Spring Boot was a community request that was somewhere in one of the old presentations. There's a link to the original Jira, rest in peace, that had the request in. I think it's been migrated to a GitHub issue now. But yeah, most of the projects, I think, are born from a need rather than from a sometimes comes out of experimentation, but more often than not, it's like a real need that's driving them.
So Edu says, yes, reports with producers. Like, that's the great one.
We've already got a report that the release notes are wrong.
Yep. There we go. Hey,
I will fix that.
Thank you for feedback. We got it. We'll take action on it. But the mock MVC tester, I think that's one of the ones that Ted is excited about.
Yes, that's been another one that's been kicking around for years and years and years. I'm so glad to see it land. Like Stefan, I think, really did most of the driving work on that. Just an issue. I think you can find the original issue in the boot issue tracker, and I think it's at least 3 or 4 years old. Because we did a bunch of work. We kind of adopted a Search A and really, really like Search A, and started to do some things like JSON testing and things like that, and really wanted to have the mock MVC code do it as well. I think I did some prototype code that just sat in the issue tracker for years and years, and it's finally landed in framework as well, which is much, much better than it landing in boot, because it's it's more foundational.
This is a theme this year. The cleanup of backlog. I was front row at Spring I/O when Jürgen was on stage. He spoke for an hour about Spring Framework and the changes that were coming, and it was mostly about bean initialization and how we have some of these large enterprises that have thousands of beans, and it takes a long time to initialize. And one of these issues that was open, I think he said 10 years, that had been open or bothering him.
Yeah.
He was able to go and resolve that issue, and I could just I felt his zen. I felt his moment, and I was excited to be there and witness it. But the cleaning up of the backlog, more and more of these issues that have been open for years are now, we have time. We're moving things forward. Does that have anything to do with this release cycle that we're on? Like, what's the reason? How come we now have time to pull these things forward? What's been the big change?
Often with these things, there's like one person who's like driving it, I think. And I think that happened in Framework. Like one person just rolled up their sleeves and decided to dig into it. But they had more time, I think, this release, because we're kind of at the natural point before we go to Framework 7, where it's like finish off, sand off the rough edges of this this final 6x round. So I think we've done a lot of work on the native stuff that kind of landed. I know there's work going on with AI, but in terms of the core framework, I think we had a bit more sort of wiggle room to kind of address these issues.
Now you have us thinking. You mentioned Framework 7. So now we still have things to look forward to. You said it. I didn't bring. You said it. Framework 7 is on the horizon somewhere.
Yes.
Do we expect a release in this same cadence that we've been getting?
I'm not sure what's been publicly announced yet on that. I believe they're still going for an annual release. I don't think it will be till November next year. So I think we've got a while to kind of work on it.
All right. Yeah, you heard it. Like that's great, right? Framework being the underpinning of everything in the ecosystem. Frameworks releases come once a year instead of once every 6 months like Spring Boot. And that makes sense. We're getting new Java versions. We have another Java version right around the corner. Java 23 is already middle-aged, right? Because we're getting Java 24 in February.
Mm-hmm.
What other features in 3.4? What other features are like, hey, this is exciting for you?
I need to read the release notes, really. Let's see what.
I'll pull them back up.
Yeah, what have we got here?
I've got the blog post. I didn't do the release notes. I got the blog.
Oh, have a look at the release notes, because they tend to follow kind of. I don't know if there's a link to them. There's normally the release notes. So there you go. I've tried to fix that link as well while we were talking, so I don't know if it will work or not. I didn't test it. So the first section is always about the upgrade. So it's kind of some stuff there, new and noteworthy. Here we go. So structured logging, which we actually didn't really talk too much about that. We can talk a little bit about structured logging. So this is the ability to basically spurt out JSON in your logs so that tools can read it and humans can't.
Yep.
And it's one of these things that sounds like a pretty simple problem, but there are some unique issues that we have with Spring Boot. First is that we wanted to support. We do support 2 logging systems, and we wanted this structured logging to work with both of them. So log back or log for J2. We want it to be like consistent-ish. That's the first problem.
Again, these are things that on the community side, hey, I wanted JSON structured logging. I've had that for a while, but I didn't have with both.
Yeah, just and the consistency and being able to kind of just switch it on. And have it work with whichever one you're using. There's always been solutions, and actually, to be honest, I think at some point you may run out of what the boot version does, and you may want to switch to something that's more integrated with your logging system. But we're trying to make 80% of what people want easy.
Right.
So that's one interesting problem is there's 2 logging systems, and we need to support both. The other one is you want to make JSON, but there are like a ton of different JSON libraries. So what do you do there? Because some apps have got Jackson, some apps have got JSON. some apps haven't even got a JSON library. So we had to kind of invent our own very, very lightweight, very, very simple kind of JSON serialization APIs as well, so that we can write out, the JSON in the structured logging without depending on any kind of third-party library.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's good. Fallback beans is a framework feature that we kind of surfaced. I think a lot of people might find that useful. What else have we got? Oh, someone I think mentioned it in the chat about the actuator stuff.
Yep. Simon talked about the more granular actuators.
Yeah, so there's some interesting things going on under the hood with actuators as well. You can change the access control now, much more fine-grained. And there's also like an abstraction that we hope people might use if they want to do deeper integrations with their own technology. So we've had the way actuator works is like you start your app and then it's either on the same port or on a different management port. And most people hit it that way. You can hit like a web URL and get some data back. But we also have had for a long time this Cloud Foundry integration that allows Cloud Foundry Apps Manager UI to go and get actuator information like in a different way. And the way that works is it's got like its own kind of routing and it's got its own security, and it uses the Cloud Foundry security to make sure that only Cloud Foundry can get the data. But it means you don't need to worry about like, I put security in my own app and I'm accidentally exposing actuator information that I don't want to, or I've got to somehow work out how to expose stuff that might be sensitive, but only to this one thing. So that's been there for a while, but we've now put that behind another like layer, another abstraction. So the idea is people can write their own way of kind of exposing actuated data. So if they want to have, a different HTTP transport that's got its own way of securing it, and provides more data just for that one particular system, then they can. And the idea here is that we could do more with the platforms that we sell, directly into Zoom.
That's fantastic. Actuator is the big thing. That was the thing that pulled me in to Spring Boot. That it was just the actuator endpoints that I was able to deploy, and I was able to get some feedback instead of the pre-baked dashboards that everybody was giving us in production for all of the Java apps. Everybody got the same dashboard. Oh, your CPU and your memory, and that was it. I was able to expose my own things. I was able to say, hey, I'm healthy or not, and I was able to put that on the actuator endpoint and get that information, and that was such a blessing.
Yeah, the history of that's very interesting as well, because Dave Sire wrote most of the original implementation. And I think that maybe came out of him running some real systems and knowing that you wanted that information. Like me personally, I'd have never guessed how popular and useful it was. And then in 2.0
over the wall, right? This is a weird time, right? We were coming out of the collapse. The 2008 happened, and what are we going to do now? And the way that we were developing software, nobody had money for the big racks of the web spheres and stuff. So a change was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But we were still in this model in 2010, 2011 of, hey, here's my WAR file, my ear file, and you throw it over the wall, and then somebody else takes it to production. And and then they give you the generic dashboards, and a lot of times the monitoring was built into one of those things, and developers don't have access to that.
For sure.
Things were changing.
I mean, if you think about it, it's a natural consequence of pulling the web server into the app, because when you had your web sphere and your app was, plugged into that, it kind of, it makes perfect sense that your app server gives you the metrics and the stuff that it can find out about your app. But when you kind of move your web server into your own app and it's just a Java-jar, then I guess it's natural that you need something like the actuator. But again, it's great having such a team with a broad range of experiences, because you get features like that are kind of born from their own experiences that you wouldn't, nobody can develop software entirely on their own. They don't have the broad enough experiences that you need, and a team really helps bring different perspectives.
And we have a bunch of those specialists, thankfully, and a community that's amazing. And yeah, this is all powerful stuff. One of the other popular features are the observability improvements. Everybody wants better observability. Beyond just the actuator, what else is happening in observability?
Yeah, so that another like interesting journey, because actuator in 1X was kind of self-contained.
Yep.
I think they maybe had support for drop wizard metrics at the time, but then the micrometer project kind of came along, and I'm pretty sure saying 2.0 we kind of
I think that's when it was
tied ourselves to micrometer, and that team has, again, you talk about small team punching above their weight. They have continued to deliver more and more. So the metrics became one thing, and then the observability that they've provided, the APIs for that, has given us a great way to kind of hook in and provide like a natural way to do the observability stuff without tying ourselves too much to one particular technology. So I mean, you should definitely, if you haven't had an office hours with the micrometer team, probably will.
We have. They're popular. The other thing is Jonathan, his timing works. He jumps in and he'll be here and he's answering questions, right? That's the benefit. Edu's here. Like, we have our community, our engineers that are making contributions. They oftentimes come in and help out here as well. So yes, we've had Jonathan on the show. And yeah, it'd be nice to do one maybe at a different time to get some of the other team, because a lot of our team is all over the world.
Yes, spread out.
Doesn't work for everybody.
No, we know about time zones.
Yes, and time zones are hard. Small teams punch above their weight. The observability stuff there was a big change with Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3 with observability. It kind of became, instead of being an add-on, it became kind of fundamental, became part of the core.
Yeah, that's right. In two we Boot used micrometer, and I think in 3 Framework used micrometer, and a lot of the integrations that we'd done that were kind of a little bit I wouldn't say hacky, but like if you're doing a Spring MVC app and you want to record metrics about when this thing starts and when it ends, you've got to, if you're doing it in Boot, you've got to use the MVC abstractions, whatever they are, to record that stuff. Whereas when it moved into Framework, they could just do it directly. It made things a lot easier.
Yeah, a lot of other integrations, a lot of other things that are happening. I want to take a minute and I'm going to scroll up to my absolute favorite, most exciting thing that I'm personally like super proud about. And that's this right here.
Oh, yes.
Phil, it's been just about 4 years. I was trying to look just about 4 years ago. I started because I was listening to Dr. Dave Sire on one of the pandemic time podcasts that we had, or shows that we had. And I was listening, and I was on my way to the gym. I was on my way to my workout, and he was talking about the Spring Boot build image. And I was thinking about Raspberry Pis at the time. And I was like, hey, how do we do this? And he just off the top of his head, oh, you might want to do this. You might want to check this. And I went, after my workout, I went home and I started like fiddling with things and trying to make a build pack that would work for my Raspberry Pis. And on the Raspberry Pis, the only ARM64 that I had was other Raspberry Pis. So I was building images using the Spring Native and building things for ARM64 a long time.
I know.
But it took 40 or 50 minutes to get the image done.
Yeah. And the number of times we have an issue, especially as Apple Silicon came about, more and more people like upgraded their dev machines. And the number of issues that we got that said, hey, I tried to do boot build image and it fell in a heap. And we'd have to say, go and use this this build pack over here that this guy's written in his spare time until we can get to it. So yeah, it's very nice to have that landed. And again, like a lot of groundwork done by Scott on that.
Yeah, tons. And how awesome is that? So for me, that personal like journey, I don't ever have to support another thing. It's great when you make a thing, and then when your friends and your peers and people that you appreciate, they start to use it. And now I was all panicked about Oliver and Josh using this build pack and worried about, is it going to work for them? Is it Spring Team? There's millions of engineers that are depending on this, and this is an important part of their livelihood. So the little stress that I had, there's nothing compared to this ecosystem that you're doing such a great job of taking care of and doing the caring, feeding.
Yeah, the build pack stuff is actually, it was a lot of work to get it working, but now it's handled by the build pack team. So most of the actual any problems with build packs is like, we call Docker and it does its work.
Yep,
that's someone else's problem.
And now for friends, don't let friends use Dockerfile. That's the line that we always say. There's too much. Developers have enough on their plate. They don't need another thing to worry about being responsible for a Docker file. Right, we're already stressed out the way it is. Right, there's new CVs coming out every day, and I gotta patch my Spring Boot. I don't want to have to patch the operating system and all the other things that I'm throwing in there. Let a build pack take care of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, another shout out for the builder. It says, always hard to explain why the images are bigger using build packs versus Docker, and that they needed to change something. All right.
Oh, why? Because it was the tiny one. The tiny one. I don't know. Actually, I'd not looked at the size of them. I don't know what the resulting image difference is. For me, it's mainly about the ARM64 support.
Yeah, I can tell you one of the things when developers are making their own Docker images, they're not doing all the things that the build packs are doing for them. So even though they might have a larger container that comes out of a build pack, that container typically is going to start up better. It's going to handle the memory better. It's going to be better sized for the workload. There's a ton of science and experience that goes into the build packs, and you get it for free. I do a quick demo about like just exploding the jar. You can go and search right now, how do you containerize your Spring Boot app? And you're going to find a bunch of Docker blogs that are exposing like, copy your jar file, but they do nothing. And then they just execute java-jar that jar file.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Because even if you're using Docker files, if you go and read the boot docs, there's a thing about how you can run a command to extract the jar file into, not just extracting it, but extracting it into things that make sense in different layers. So the bits of your app that change are kind of in the lowest, or is it the highest level layer? I don't know. Anyway, you think of it like an onion, and you want like the JDK and then your libraries, and then the very sort of skin of the onion is your app. And if you've got a new version of your app, you just need to replace the skin, not the whole onion. I think that's a good analogy.
There's tons, and all the other new features that we got with Spring Boot 3.x and beyond the AOT processing, we have the class data sharing. Right? Like these types of things that you can do with build packs, you get them, especially in our commercial build packs. These things are done for you automatically, and there's a massive benefit. Don't write your own Docker files. Another shout out. Hey, Simon says, don't ignore Trivy. Right. This is another benefit. We got it with Spring Boot 3.3, the SBOM actuator endpoint. So now in production, I can go and I can see in real time, if I want, what's actually running. Here's my SBOM, and I can deliver that as an endpoint. That's massive. That's huge. The Docker or the build packs have been delivering that SBOM for a long time. And now we can keep track of, I have not just my build pack, I have my application layer's SBOM and the container that's delivering that application layer. I have the SBOM for everything that was included in that build pack. That's great, right?
Yeah.
Security is important.
Yeah, I think the SBOM support is good as well. I think that was last release we did that.
We got 3. JitterTed HTML unit 4.x is finally usable. This is great. JitterTed likes testing. He's a TDD expert. He's amazing. So when I hear things from JitterTed, I lean into it.
Yeah, that one's probably just an unglamorous upgrade that needed some work doing, I guess. There's sometimes a lot of those that, the features that people actually appreciate sometimes aren't always the ones that are kind of big on the announcement blogs.
It's fantastic. There's something for everybody. So we're here, 3.4. The bits are out there. Thomas says they were using the milestone because of the HTML. Yeah, the bits are here. So now, if you've got any other questions, Phil Webb, co-creator of Spring Boot, thank you so much for hanging out. We'll see if there's any other questions from the audience, but right. their call to action is go and upgrade.
Yeah, give it a try.
Use these bits, run your pipelines, run your tests. Right after this, shortly, JitterTed is going to be upgrading his software live over on Twitch. So I think I have a link to it.
Yeah, you should put that up. I don't know whether I want to watch that or not. It might give me anxiety.
he's entertaining and educational. Like he's amazing. So I'm going to put that here because he's announced it. He's going to do it. So from here, we can go and watch JitterTed do some upgrades, and it's going to be a good time. And for our commercial customers that have Spring Application Advisor, they're just running the pipeline. They're getting updated. We're moving. Things are looking up. It's a great time to be a Spring developer.
Always a good time.
We have somebody. Hey, is there any new meetup in Kansas City? I will find out. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm in San Francisco. Today, Rod Johnson is here for the San Francisco Jug, so I'm going to be there. But I will circle back and I'll see if we have our next Kansas City Jug announced. Thank you for being here. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's all. Everybody's hoping this, Ted. It just worked. Let's move on to features.
Yeah, I think the if I was to put one warning out, it would be if you're doing REST calls. The HTTP client changes are probably the most likely to bite you in a very subtle way. So if you find that like redirects aren't being followed, or redirects suddenly are being followed and they weren't before, the first thing to try would be to switch back to the old version and see if that fixes your problem. That's probably the one. I'm a big fan of things that break when you upgrade. I'm not a big fan of things that limp along. So this is one of those ones that might look like things work, but you get
sometimes it's better to break than to change behavior.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't want to break your app, but I mean if something's changed, I kind of like hard failures rather than we'll do our best.
Yeah, we got a great job, guys. Congratulations to the Spring team. Congratulations to the entire community for all the contributions that have got us here and continue to take us forward. Congratulations to everybody. Job well done. Phil, thank you so much for joining. I want to do this again.
All right.
For the next release. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for all the hard work.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving to those that celebrate.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you soon. Go upgrade all the palms. Do it.